The lunch rush had finally ended, and Lily wiped the sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. Her feet ached in the cheap black shoes she'd bought from the discount store. 6 hours into her shift at the Royal Plate, an upscale restaurant nestled in the heart of Manhattan, and she still had another 6 to go. The double shift wasn't ideal, but the tips were good, and she needed every penny she could get. "Table 7 needs water," called out Tina, the head waitress, as she rushed past with a tray of desserts balanced on her palm. Lily nodded, grabbed a water pitcher, and made her way across the polished marble floor. The Royal Plate was known for its elegant atmosphere, with crystal chandeliers hanging from high ceilings and a beautiful grand piano sitting in the corner. That piano. Lily couldn't help but glance at it every time she passed. It was a Steinway, probably worth more than she'd make in 5 years. As she refilled water glasses for the businessmen at table 7, they continued their conversation as if she were invisible. This was normal at the Royal Plate. To most customers, the waitstaff were just moving furniture, there to serve but not to be acknowledged. "Did you hear about the Johnson merger?" One man in an expensive suit asked another. $300 million. "Can you believe it?" his colleague replied, not even pausing as Lily carefully poured water into his glass. She finished and stepped back, offering a polite smile that went unnoticed. Sometimes she wondered if she could stand on her head and sing, and these types of customers still wouldn't look up from their business talk. The restaurant began to empty out as the afternoon lull set in. Lily used this time to clean her section and roll silverware and napkins for the dinner service. Her back was sore from carrying heavy trays all morning, but she worked quickly. The faster she finished her side duties, the sooner she could take her break. "You're working another double today?" asked Miguel, one of the busboys, as he collected dirty dishes. "Yeah, rent's due next week," Lily replied, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "Plus, I need to make a payment on Mom's medical bills." Miguel nodded sympathetically. "How is she doing?" "Better. The new medication seems to be helping." Lily managed a small smile. Her mother's illness had changed everything. 2 years ago, Lily had been on a completely different path, studying piano performance at Juilliard with a partial scholarship. When her mother was diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disease, Lily had put her education on hold to care for her and work full-time. What was supposed to be a temporary break had stretched into years. After finishing her side work, Lily took her 30-minute break in the staff room at the back of the restaurant. She unwrapped the sandwich she'd packed from home. Peanut butter and jelly, the cheapest lunch she could make. As she ate, she pulled out her worn notebook and began writing music notes, humming quietly to herself. "Still composing?" asked Diane, one of the older waitresses, as she came in to grab her purse. Lily nodded, a bit embarrassed. "Just ideas. Nothing serious, and don't sell yourself short, honey. I heard you playing on that old keyboard in the break room last week. You've got real talent." "Thanks," Lily said, though she found it hard to believe sometimes. Dreams felt distant when you were spending 16 hours a day serving food to people who didn't see you. By 6 o'clock, the dinner crowd had begun to arrive. The Royal Plate transformed in the evening, with dimmed lights and candles on each table creating a warm glow. The prices on the menu doubled after 5, and so did the expectations of the customers. Lily's section filled quickly with well-dressed couples and groups of friends celebrating special occasions. She moved efficiently between tables, taking orders, delivering food, and making sure everyone had everything they needed. Years of practice had made her good at anticipating what people wanted before they asked. "Excuse me," called a woman wearing diamond earrings that caught the light. "This steak is medium, and I asked for medium rare." "I'm so sorry," Lily said, taking the plate. "I'll have the kitchen prepare a new one right away." In the kitchen, Chef Robert rolled his eyes when she explained the situation. "These people don't know the difference between medium and medium rare. They just like to complain." "Maybe," Lily agreed with a small smile, "but they tip better when they get exactly what they want." The chef laughed and started preparing a new steak. Lily used the moment to rest against the counter, giving her feet a brief respite. The kitchen was hot and chaotic, but sometimes it felt more honest than the dining room. Here, at least, people said what they meant. As she waited, her eyes drifted to the small window that looked out toward the dining area. From this angle, she could see the grand piano. The owner had hired a pianist for Saturday nights only, leaving the beautiful instrument untouched most of the week. What a waste, she thought. Order up, Chef Robert called, sliding the new steak toward her. Back in the dining room, Lily served the recooked steak with a fresh smile. Here you are, medium rare. Is there anything else I can get for you? The woman cut into the meat, nodded with satisfaction, and waved Lily away without a word of thanks. It was moments like these when Lily felt the weight of her current life pressing down on her. She had spent years practicing piano for hours each day, developing a skill that had once earned her admiration and respect. Now she was invisible, but she couldn't afford to dwell on such thoughts. There were more orders to take, more food to serve, more customers to please. By 10 o'clock, Lily's feet felt like they were on fire, and her smile had become fixed in place. Only 2 more hours, she told herself, serving desserts to a table celebrating a birthday. Just 2 more hours, and then she could go home. Home was a tiny apartment in Queens that she shared with her mother. It wasn't much, but they had managed to fit Lily's keyboard in the corner of the living room. That keyboard, second-hand and missing 2 keys at the higher end, was her connection to her former life. You got a big table, Tina informed her, as Lily returned from delivering the birthday dessert. Table 12. 6 businessmen. Looked like they've already had a few drinks at the bar. Lily nodded, taking a deep breath. Late-night business groups could mean good tips, but they could also be demanding and sometimes inappropriate after a few drinks. She straightened her uniform, put on her professional smile, and approached the table. The men were laughing loudly as she arrived, glasses of expensive scotch already in front of them. They wore tailored suits and watches that probably cost more than her yearly salary. One of them, a man with salt and pepper hair sitting at the head of the table, was clearly the leader of the group. "Good evening, gentlemen," Lily said warmly. "Welcome to the Royal Plate. My name is Lily, and I'll be your server tonight. Can I start you with some appetizers?" The man at the head of the table looked up at her, and for a moment Lily felt like she was actually being seen. His eyes were sharp and assessing, taking in her appearance in a way that made her uncomfortable, though she maintained her smile. "We'll take one of everything from the appetizer menu," he said, his voice carrying the easy confidence of someone used to giving orders and having them followed. "And another round of drinks." "Of course, sir," Lily replied, writing down the order. "And would you like to hear about our specials tonight?" "Why not?" he said with a dismissive wave of his hand. As Lily described the chef's special preparations for the evening, she noticed that most of the men had returned to their conversation, not bothering to listen. Only the man at the head of the table watched her, though his expression suggested he was more interested in studying her than hearing about the food. When she finished, he simply said, "We'll let you know what we want for the main course after the appetizers." Lily nodded and headed to the kitchen to place the order. As she walked away, she heard laughter from the table and felt their eyes on her back. "Watch out for table 12, she warned another waitress as she passed. "I think they're going to be a handful." The night continued, and Lily moved between her tables with practiced efficiency. But table 12 demanded more and more of her attention, sending back dishes they claimed weren't prepared correctly, and ordering expensive bottles of wine that they barely tasted before requesting something different. By the time they were ready to leave, it was past midnight, and Lily was the last server still on the floor. The kitchen had closed, and the cleaning staff was waiting for this final table to depart so they could finish their work. The man with the salt and pepper hair paid the bill over $2,000 with a black card that he didn't even look at when he signed the receipt. Lily held her breath, hoping the tip would make the difficult service worth it. As the group stood to leave, the man handed her the signed receipt with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You were very patient with us tonight," he said. "Thank you, sir. I hope you enjoyed your meal," Lily replied automatically. Only after they had gone did she look at the tip line. He had left $300, a generous 15% that somehow still felt insulting given how demanding they had been and how much money they had so casually spent. Lily finished cleaning her section and counted her tips for the day. Between both shifts, she had made just enough to cover this month's rent with a little left over for her mother's medication. Not enough for savings, not enough for piano lessons, certainly not enough to return to school. But enough to keep going for another month. It was nearly 1 in the morning when she finally left the restaurant. The city was quieter now, though never truly silent. Lily caught the late train back to Queens, her tired body slumped against the subway car window. Most days she would have been too exhausted to do anything but fall into bed when she got home. But tonight, as she often did after particularly difficult shifts, she knew she would sit at her keyboard in the dark, careful not to wake her mother, and play. Her fingers would remember what her mind sometimes forgot during long days of serving others, that she was more than just a waitress. That somewhere inside her a talented pianist was waiting for her chance to be heard. 2 days later, Lily was back at the Royal Plate for the lunch shift. Her fingers were stiff and sore from practicing late into the night. The second-hand keyboard in her apartment was nothing like the grand piano she had trained on at Juilliard, but it kept her skills from completely disappearing. Some nights she would close her eyes and pretend she was back on stage, performing for an audience that actually wanted to hear her play. "Lily, you're taking sections 3 and 4 today," Tina announced, handing her a stack of clean menus. "And heads up, the owner says some big shots are coming in for lunch. Tech investors or something." Lily nodded, suppressing a yawn. She had slept poorly, kept awake by her mother's coughing. The new medication helped, but the bad nights still came frequently. "Any special instructions?" she asked, tying her apron around her waist. "Just the usual, don't mess up," Tina replied with a wry smile. Apparently one of them is some hotshot billionaire, real demanding type. The restaurant filled quickly as the lunch hour approached. Lily moved efficiently between her tables, taking orders and delivering food with practiced ease. Her section was in the back corner, near the grand piano that sat silently on its small platform. Occasionally, her eyes would drift to it, imagining how it would feel to sit on that bench and let her fingers dance across those pristine ivory keys. At precisely noon, the group Tina had mentioned arrived. 5 men in expensive suits were led to the largest table in Lily's section. She immediately recognized the man with salt and pepper hair who had left the large tip 2 nights before, the one who had watched her with calculating eyes. Today, he seemed to be the center of attention, with the others laughing at his jokes and nodding eagerly at his comments. Lily approached the table with her professional smile firmly in place. "Good afternoon, gentlemen. Welcome to the Royal Plate. My name is Lily, and I'll be your server today." The salt and pepper-haired man looked up, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. "You were our waitress the other night?" "Yes, sir," Lily replied, surprised he remembered. Most customers never noticed the staff enough to recognize them from one visit to the next. "Well, let's hope the service is better during daylight hours," he said, causing his companions to chuckle. Lily maintained her smile, though it felt more brittle now. "I'll certainly do my best. May I tell you about our specials today?" She described the lunch offerings, aware that the man, clearly the leader of the group, was studying her again with that same calculating gaze. When she finished, he ordered for the entire table without consulting the others, including several items not on the regular menu that would require special preparation from the kitchen. "And a bottle of the 1982 Bordeaux," he added. "I'm sorry, sir," Lily said carefully, "but that particular wine isn't available by the bottle at lunch. It's only served for dinner service." His expression hardened. "I had it here last month during lunch." "That may have been a special arrangement, sir. I can check with the manager if you'd like." "Do that," he said dismissively, turning back to his companions. Lily hurried to find George, the floor manager, who was busy arranging flowers at the host stand. "George, the gentleman at table 7 is asking for the 82 Bordeaux, but I thought we don't serve that at lunch." George glanced over at the table and immediately straightened his tie. "That's Richard Winters," he said in a low voice. "Who?" Lily asked, not recognizing the name. George looked at her incredulously. "Richard Winters, the tech billionaire, owns half the startups in Silicon Valley. He's worth something like $12 billion. "Oh," Lily said, still not entirely understanding why that would change the wine policy. "Give him whatever he wants," George instructed. "I'll get the wine from the cellar myself." By the time Lily returned to the table, the men were deep in conversation about some kind of investment opportunity. She quietly informed Mr. Winters that the wine would be brought out shortly. "Well, that's a start," he said without looking at her. "Now about those appetizers, we don't have all day." Lily rushed to the kitchen to put in their order, marking it as high priority. Chef Robert gave her a sympathetic look when she explained who the customers were. "Winters, huh? He comes in every few months. Never satisfied with anything. Last time he sent back a perfectly cooked steak 3 times. The lunch progressed exactly as Chef Robert had predicted. Richard Winters found fault with nearly everything: the temperature of the soup, the texture of the bread, the presentation of the main course. Each time Lily apologized and rushed to correct the issue, though there was rarely anything actually wrong with the food. "The sauce on this fish is too thick," Winters complained, pushing his plate away after barely tasting it. "Take it back and tell the chef to do it properly this time." "Yes, sir." "I'm very sorry," Lily said, taking the plate. Her feet ached and her cheeks hurt from maintaining her professional smile. But she kept her voice pleasant and apologetic. In the kitchen, Chef Robert took one look at the returned plate and threw his hands up in exasperation. "There's nothing wrong with this. The sauce is exactly how it should be." "I know," Lily said quietly, "but he says it's too thick." "Fine," the chef grumbled, taking a new plate. "I'll make it so thin it'll be like water. Then he'll complain it's too runny." When Lily brought the new dish back, Winters barely glanced at it before nodding grudgingly. "Better," he said, though he still didn't eat more than a few bites. The other men at the table seemed uncomfortable with his behavior but said nothing. One of them, younger than the others with kind eyes, gave Lily an apologetic smile when she refilled his water glass. As she cleared away their barely touched main courses and prepared to offer dessert, Winters leaned back in his chair and addressed his companions. "This is why I'm hesitant to invest in your education startup, Tom. It's the same problem I see everywhere: mediocrity passing for excellence." He gestured around the restaurant. "Look at this place. Charges premium prices but can't get a simple sauce right. It's like these service people." He waved a hand in Lily's direction without looking at her. "They do the minimum required to get by. No excellence, no attention to detail. That's why they're serving food instead of running companies." Lily froze, the stack of plates in her hand suddenly feeling much heavier. She knew she should just ignore the comment and continue working. But something about the casual cruelty of it made her heart pound. "Would any of you care for dessert?" she asked, her voice somehow still steady despite the heat rising in her cheeks. "I'll take the chocolate torte," said the younger man with the kind eyes, clearly trying to move past the uncomfortable moment. "Nothing for me," Winters said. "Just the check." He turned to one of his companions. "As I was saying, Tom, you need to understand what separates success from failure. Look at her." He nodded toward Lily, speaking as if she weren't there. "Probably didn't apply herself in school, made poor choices, and now she's carrying plates for a living. That's what happens when you lack vision and work ethic." Lily's hands trembled slightly as she finished writing down the dessert orders. Part of her wanted to tell this arrogant man that she had been at the top of her class, that she had performed with orchestras, that circumstances beyond her control had forced her to put her dreams on hold. But she said nothing, knowing that speaking up would only cost her a job she desperately needed. "I'll be right back with your desserts and the check," she said, her voice tight but professional. As she walked away, she heard Winters continue, his voice carrying across the now quiet restaurant. "This generation wants everything handed to them. They don't understand sacrifice or hard work." In the kitchen, Lily took a deep breath, blinking back tears of frustration. She had worked 16-hour days, put her own dreams aside to care for her mother, pinched pennies until they screamed, and this wealthy man who had probably never worried about paying rent assumed she was lazy and unambitious. "You okay?" asked Miguel, noticing her expression as he loaded the dishwasher. "Fine," Lily said shortly, gathering her composure. "Just a difficult table. Winters," Miguel guessed. When she nodded, he sighed. "That guy made Becky cry last month. Real piece of work." Lily returned to the table with desserts for those who had ordered them and placed the black leather folder with the check directly in front of Winters. He didn't acknowledge her, continuing his lecture about excellence and standards to his increasingly uncomfortable-looking companions. As she turned to leave, her foot caught on the plush carpet and she stumbled slightly. The water pitcher she was carrying tipped, sending a splash of ice water onto Winters' sleeve and lap. The restaurant seemed to freeze. Lily's heart stopped as Winters looked down at his wet suit, which she knew probably cost more than she made in 3 months. Then up at her, his expression darkening. "I'm so sorry," she gasped, grabbing napkins from the table and offering them to him. "It was an accident. I tripped on the carpet." Winters pushed her hand away and stood up, water dripping from his sleeve. "Is this what passes for service here?" he said loudly, looking around for the manager. This is exactly what I was talking about. Incompetence. George appeared immediately, profuse apologies falling from his lips. Mr. Winters, I am so sorry. Please, the restaurant will cover your dry cleaning, of course. Dry cleaning? Winters laughed coldly. This suit is ruined. He turned his icy gaze on Lily. I suppose this is what happens when you hire people who clearly aren't qualified to carry plates, let alone serve expensive meals. Lily stood rooted to the spot, her face burning with humiliation, as every eye in the restaurant turned toward her. She had never been spoken to like this in her life, not even by the strictest professors at Juilliard. Tell me, Winters continued, his voice dripping with condescension, what exactly qualified you for this job? Because basic coordination seems beyond your capabilities. The younger man with kind eyes stood up. Richard, it was just an accident. Let's not— No, Tom, this is a teachable moment, Winters interrupted. This is exactly why your little education app won't work. Some people just don't have what it takes, no matter how much education you throw at them. Look at her, this is probably the peak of her capabilities right here, and she can't even do this right. Lily felt something snap inside her. 6 years of classical training at the most prestigious music school in the country, performances that had received standing ovations, sacrifices that had cost her everything, all reduced to nothing by this man who knew nothing about her. Mr. Winters, George said, stepping between them, please allow me to comp your entire meal today. Lily is one of our most valued employees, and this was clearly an accident. Valued, Winters scoffed. For what? Her unique ability to spill water, or is it her blank stare that adds to the ambiance? Several customers looked away uncomfortably. Lily wanted to disappear, to run from the restaurant and never come back. But she couldn't afford to lose this job. I'm very sorry, sir, she said again, her voice barely audible. Winters ignored her, turning back to George. I expect better from this establishment. If this is the quality of staff you hire, perhaps I should take my business elsewhere in the future. With that final shot, he threw his napkin on the table and strode toward the exit, his entourage hurrying after him. Only the young man with kind eyes paused, placing several large bills on the table and giving Lily an apologetic smile before following the others. In their wake, the restaurant remained uncomfortably silent. Lily stood motionless, the wet napkin still clutched in her hand, feeling as though she'd been struck. Take a break, George said quietly, touching her shoulder. 10 minutes. Get some air. Lily nodded numbly and headed toward the back exit. As she pushed open the door to the alley behind the restaurant, the cool air hit her face and the tears she had been holding back finally began to fall. She knew she should be grateful that she still had her job. But all she could think about was how easily that man, Richard Winters, had dismissed her entire worth as a human being over a water spill, and how powerless she had been to defend herself. A week passed and the incident with Richard Winters faded into the background noise of daily restaurant drama. Lily continued her routine, double shifts at the Royal Plate, late nights practicing on her keyboard, early mornings helping her mother with physical therapy. The rhythm of her life had a certain predictable exhaustion to it, but at least the tips had been good lately. Big news, George announced during the pre-shift meeting one Tuesday morning. The entire waitstaff stood in a circle in the dining room, still empty before opening. This Friday night, the Royal Plate is hosting the annual charity gala for the Children's Hospital Foundation. A murmur went through the staff. Charity events meant wealthy donors, which usually translated to good tips, but also high-pressure service with no room for mistakes. We'll be closed to regular customers, George continued. Set menu, premium wine pairings, and a silent auction. I need everyone at their absolute best. These are the kind of people who can make or break our reputation with a single social media post. Lily listened with only half her attention, her eyes drawn as always to the grand piano. For special events like this, the restaurant usually hired a professional pianist to provide background music, while guests mingled and ate. She wondered who they would bring in this time. Lily, George called, catching her attention. I need you to take lead on the West Section tables. The hospital board members will be seated there, along with some of our biggest regular donors. She nodded, pushing away thoughts of the piano. Yes, sir. I'll make sure everything's perfect. As the meeting dispersed and everyone began their opening duties, Tina sidled up beside Lily. Heard a rumor that your favorite customer is on the hospital board, she said with a grimace. Lily's stomach dropped. Please tell me you're not talking about Richard Winters. Tina's sympathetic wince was answer enough. Sorry. Apparently he's a major donor. Gives millions each year. Of course he was, Lily thought bitterly. The universe seemed determined to put that man in her path. Maybe he won't remember me, she said without much hope. Maybe, Tina agreed, though her tone suggested she didn't believe it either. A man like Winters would likely remember the waitress who had spilled water on his expensive suit, especially if she was serving him again. The days leading up to the gala were a flurry of preparation. The entire restaurant was transformed with elegant decorations, the regular tables rearranged to create more open space, and the wine cellar rated for its most impressive bottles. Even the grand piano was moved to a more prominent position near the center of the room, and polished until it gleamed under the crystal chandeliers. On Friday morning, Lily arrived early to help with the final preparations. The air buzzed with nervous energy as the staff polished silverware, folded napkins into perfect shapes, and memorized the special menu. "Has anyone seen Andrew?" George asked, looking harried as he checked items off his clipboard. Andrew was the pianist who usually played for special events, a retired symphony musician who supplemented his income with gigs like this. "Not yet," replied the hostess. "But it's still early." George nodded distractedly and continued his rounds. Lily focused on preparing her section, making sure each table setting was flawless. She kept telling herself that even if Richard Winters was attending, he would be just one guest among many. She wouldn't have to interact with him much. By 4 o'clock, the staff was dressed in their formal black and white uniforms, reviewing final details before the doors opened at 6. The catering team had arrived with trays of elegant hors d'oeuvres, and the bartenders were setting up stations around the room. George's phone rang, and he stepped away to answer it. When he returned, his expression was grim. "Andrew's out. Food poisoning. Says he can barely stand, let alone play piano for 4 hours." The staff exchanged worried glances. Live music was an expected feature of these galas, and finding a replacement pianist on such short notice would be nearly impossible. "What are we going to do?" asked the hostess. "Can we just play recorded music?" George shook his head. "Not for this crowd. They're paying $500 a plate for an elegant experience." "Recorded music sounds cheap." Lily bit her lip, her heart suddenly pounding. She'd overheard enough of the conversation to understand the problem. Part of her wanted to stay silent, to keep her head down and just do her job as a waitress. But another part, the part that still dreamed of performing, couldn't let the opportunity pass. "I can play," she said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. "You?" George asked, surprise evident in his voice. "You play piano?" Lily nodded, suddenly self-conscious. "I studied at Juilliard for 3 years before I had to leave. Classical performance was my focus." The staff stared at her in disbelief. Tina was the first to recover. "She's not kidding. I've heard her humming classical pieces while rolling silverware. Girl knows her stuff." George looked torn, glancing between Lily and the gleaming piano. "This is a high-profile event, Lily. These people expect professional quality." "I am professional quality," Lily replied, a hint of the confidence she'd once possessed returning to her voice. "Or I was. I can handle it. Like classical, jazz standards, whatever you need." "Let her audition at least," Tina suggested. "What do we have to lose?" After a moment's hesitation, George nodded. "Okay, show me what you can do." Lily approached the piano with a mixture of nervousness and excitement. It had been so long since she'd played on a real grand piano, not since leaving school. She sat down on the bench, adjusted its height, and placed her hands on the keys. They felt cool and smooth beneath her fingers, so different from her worn keyboard at home. She took a deep breath and began to play. She chose Debussy's Clair de Lune, a piece that showcased both technical skill and emotional expression. As her fingers moved across the keys, the restaurant faded away, and for a few minutes she was transported back to the concert halls where she had once performed. The music flowed through her, delicate and powerful at once. When she finished, she looked up to find the entire staff watching her in stunned silence. "Where have you been hiding that?" George asked finally, his expression a mixture of shock and relief. Lily shrugged, feeling slightly embarrassed by their reaction. "It never came up." "Well, it's coming up now," he said decisively. "You're our pianist for tonight. We'll find someone to cover your tables. But, Lily began, suddenly realizing what this meant. She'd be giving up her waitressing tips for the night, which she had been counting on to help with her mother's medical bills. George seemed to read her mind. "We'll pay you Andrew's rate," he assured her. "It's in the budget already. Plus, you'll be visible to everyone at the gala, including potential future employers. This could be good for you, Lily." The idea of being center stage again, even just as background music at a charity event, sent a thrill through her. But there was also fear. What if she wasn't as good as she used to be? What if she embarrassed herself in front of all those wealthy, influential people? "I don't have anything to wear," she said weakly, grasping at practical concerns to mask her anxiety. "My waitress uniform isn't right for a pianist. I have a black dress that would fit you," offered Tina. "Simple, elegant, perfect for playing piano at a fancy event." With her excuses evaporating, Lily nodded slowly. "Okay," she said. "I'll do it." The next 2 hours were a whirlwind. Lily rushed home to shower and do her hair while Tina brought the dress to the restaurant. When she returned, she changed in the staff room, her hands shaking slightly as Tina helped zip up the simple but elegant black dress. "You look like a completely different person," Tina said, stepping back to admire her. "Like I knew you were pretty, but wow. You're going to knock them dead." Lily glanced in the mirror and hardly recognized herself. The black dress was fitted at the top with a modest neckline and flowed from the waist down, ending just below her knees, perfect for sitting at a piano. Her dark hair was swept up in a simple but elegant style that made her look more sophisticated than her usual ponytail. "Now for the finishing touch," Tina said, reaching into her bag. She pulled out a delicate silver necklace with a small piano charm, borrowed from my niece who's taking lessons. "For good luck." Lily's eyes welled up as Tina fastened the necklace around her neck. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything." "Just remember us little people when you're famous," Tina joked, giving her a quick hug. "Now go warm up. Guests will be arriving in 30 minutes. As the staff made final preparations, Lily sat at the piano and ran through scales and arpeggios, reacquainting herself with the touch and tone of the instrument. It responded beautifully to her touch. Its sound rich and resonant in a way her home keyboard could never match. George had given her a list of suggested pieces. Light classical during the arrival and cocktail hour, transitioning to jazz standards during dinner. She had nodded confidently, even though her stomach was in knots. It had been years since she had performed publicly, and never for a crowd like this. At precisely 6 o'clock, the doors opened, and the guests began to arrive. From her position at the piano, Lily could see everything: the women in designer gowns dripping with jewels, the men in impeccable tuxedos, the air of wealth and privilege that surrounded them all. She began to play as they entered, her music providing an elegant soundtrack to their arrival. Most guests glanced her way, nodded appreciatively at the pleasant background music, then continued their conversations without really seeing her. It was exactly what background music was supposed to be: present but not intrusive. By 7, the room was filled with the gentle buzz of conversation punctuated by occasional laughter. Lily transitioned to jazz standards as the guests took their seats for dinner. From her position, she could see the hospital board's table clearly, and there, in the center, was Richard Winters. He looked exactly as she remembered, impeccably dressed, commanding attention without effort, his salt and pepper hair perfectly styled. The younger man with kind eyes who had been at the lunch was seated beside him, along with several other people who seemed important based on how deferential everyone was toward them. Winters hadn't looked her way once, his attention focused on the people at his table. Lily wasn't sure if she was relieved or irritated by his lack of recognition. Part of her wanted him to see her, to realize that the waitress he had humiliated was more than just a server with poor coordination. But another part was grateful to be invisible to him, able to play her music without his judgmental gaze. As the first course was served, Lily continued playing, losing herself in the music. The knots in her stomach gradually loosened as she remembered how much she loved this, the feeling of creating something beautiful, of expressing emotions through her fingertips. Even as just background music for people who weren't really listening, it felt right in a way that carrying plates never had. She was so absorbed in her playing that she didn't immediately notice when the conversation at Winter's table grew heated. Only when a voice was raised did she glance over to see Winters gesturing emphatically as he argued with another board member. "The program is wasteful," he was saying, his voice carrying across the room. "We're throwing money at a problem without addressing the root causes." "These are children, Richard," replied an older woman at the table. "They need our help now, not after we've solved systemic healthcare issues." "And they'll get it," Winters said dismissively. "But we need efficiency, measurable outcomes. This new music therapy program you're championing, where's the evidence it works? It sounds like feel-good nonsense to me." Lily's fingers faltered on the keys. Music therapy had been a passion of hers at Juilliard. She had volunteered at hospitals, playing for sick children, seeing firsthand how music could bring comfort and healing when medicine reached its limits. The older woman was trying to respond, but Winters was talking over her, his voice growing louder. "Piano lessons for sick kids? That money could buy actual medical equipment." Without thinking, Lily changed her music. She had been playing a gentle jazz standard, but she transitioned smoothly into something with more power and emotion. Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, its haunting melody cutting through the dinner conversation. Heads turned toward the piano as the music shifted from pleasant background to compelling foreground. Lily played with all the skill and passion she had developed over years of study, letting the music express what she couldn't say with words. As the piece progressed, the room grew quieter, conversations pausing as people listened. Even the servers moved more carefully, trying not to disrupt the unexpected performance. Lily kept her eyes on the keys, too afraid to look up and see the reaction. But she could feel the attention of the room shifting toward her. When she finally reached the end of the piece, the room had fallen completely silent. Lily looked up nervously, uncertain what to expect, and found herself looking directly into the surprised eyes of Richard Winters. For a moment, time seemed to stand still as Lily's eyes locked with Richard Winters. The room remained hushed, the final notes of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata still hanging in the air. Lily could feel her heart pounding against her ribs as she saw recognition slowly dawn on his face. The silence was broken by applause, tentative at first, then growing in enthusiasm. Guests turned to one another, whispering behind their hands, their expressions a mixture of surprise and appreciation. Lily tore her gaze away from Winters and looked down at the keys, her cheeks flushed with a combination of embarrassment and pride. "Bravo," someone called out. "Absolutely beautiful," added another voice. Lily nodded her thanks and, not knowing what else to do, transitioned smoothly into another piece. This time Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, something gentle to allow conversations to resume. As she played, she kept her eyes on the piano, too nervous to look up again, especially toward the hospital board table where Winters sat. The servers began bringing out the main course, moving gracefully between tables as Lily's music once again provided the backdrop to the evening. She lost herself in the familiar patterns of notes, allowing her fingers to follow paths they had traveled thousands of times in practice rooms and recital halls. The piano responded to her touch as if they were old friends reunited after a long separation. As she neared the end of the piece, she chanced to glance toward Winters's table. The discussion appeared to have resumed, though more subdued now. The older woman who had defended the music therapy program was speaking, and this time Winters appeared to be listening, his expression unreadable. The young man with kind eyes sitting next to him was watching Lily play, a thoughtful smile on his face. The next hour passed in a blur of music and quiet observation. Lily moved through her repertoire, carefully selecting pieces that balanced artistic expression with appropriate dinner atmosphere. Each time she finished a piece, there was a smattering of applause, something that never happened to the regular pianist, from what she'd heard. People were actually listening. During dessert, George approached the piano during a brief pause between pieces, leaning down to speak quietly in her ear. "You're incredible," he said, his voice full of genuine admiration. "Where have you been hiding this talent?" "The guests are raving about you," Lily smiled shyly. "Thank you. It feels good to play again." "The hospital board president would like you to play something special to close out the dinner portion," George continued. "Something impressive before people move to the auction area." "Can you do that?" Lily nodded, though her stomach tightened with nerves. "Any requests?" she said, to let you choose. "Something that showcases your talent." As George walked away, Lily considered her options. If she wanted to truly demonstrate what she was capable of, there was one piece that had always been her signature: Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, specifically the first movement. It was technically demanding and emotionally powerful, not typical background music by any means. It was the piece she had been preparing for her junior recital when she'd had to leave Juilliard. As the servers cleared the dessert plates, George tapped a spoon against a wine glass, calling for attention. The room gradually quieted. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "on behalf of the Royal Plate, I want to thank you for your generosity toward the Children's Hospital Foundation tonight." He paused for a round of applause. "Before we move to the silent auction portion of the evening, our pianist has prepared a special piece to close the dinner. Please join me in welcoming Lily Chen." Lily's head snapped up in surprise. She hadn't expected to be introduced by name. A spotlight suddenly illuminated the piano, and she found herself the center of attention in a way she hadn't been for years. The guests were all looking at her now, no longer seeing background music but a performer. She took a deep breath, adjusted her position on the bench, and placed her hands on the keys. This was the moment to show what she was truly capable of, to remind herself and perhaps prove to others that she was more than just a waitress who had spilled water on an expensive suit. Without further introduction, she began to play. The opening chords of Rachmaninoff's concerto rang out dark and commanding. Though she didn't have an orchestra behind her, Lily's fingers conveyed both the piano part and hints of the orchestral backdrop, creating a rich tapestry of sound that filled the room. As she moved into the main theme, her hands flew across the keys with precision and passion, her body swaying slightly with the intensity of the music. This was not background music. This was a performance. Every eye in the room was on her now, conversations entirely forgotten. Servers paused with trays in hand, guests sat motionless in their chairs, and even the bartenders stopped mixing drinks to listen. Lily's world narrowed to just her hands and the piano. The years of practice, the sacrifices, the dreams deferred, all of it poured into her playing. The complex runs and arpeggios that had once taken months to master now flowed from her fingers as naturally as breath. This was who she had always been beneath the waitress uniform and the polite customer service smile. When she reached the piece's powerful climax, she finally allowed herself to look up. The faces watching her were transformed, some with mouths slightly open in surprise, others with eyes closed in appreciation. And there, at the hospital board table, was Richard Winters, his usual mask of superiority replaced by an expression of utter astonishment. Their eyes met for the second time that evening, but this time it was different. He wasn't looking at a clumsy waitress who had spilled water on his suit. He was seeing her, really seeing her perhaps for the first time. Lily held his gaze as her fingers continued their dance across the keys, a small, defiant part of her enjoying his shock. The man who had dismissed her as someone who lacked vision and work ethic was now witnessing exactly what she was capable of. As she approached the end of the movement, she broke their eye contact and focused once more on the music, bringing the piece to its powerful conclusion. The final notes resonated throughout the room, hanging in the air for a brief, perfect moment of silence. Then the room erupted. The applause was immediate and thunderous, guests rising to their feet in a spontaneous standing ovation. Lily sat frozen at the piano, momentarily overwhelmed by the response. It had been so long since she had received applause like this, wholehearted and appreciative, the kind that recognized not just pleasant background music but true artistry. She stood shakily and offered a small bow, her eyes stinging with unexpected tears. The applause continued, showing no signs of dying down. From the corner of her eye, she could see George beaming at her from near the kitchen, and Tina giving her an enthusiastic thumbs up. "Brava," called the older woman from the hospital board, clapping enthusiastically. "Absolutely magnificent." As the applause finally began to subside, guests started moving toward the auction area in the adjoining room, many stopping by the piano to offer personal compliments. Lily thanked them graciously, still somewhat dazed by the response. A few people asked if she performed regularly somewhere, looking surprised when she admitted this was her first public performance in years. "You should be on a concert stage," said one elegantly dressed woman, pressing her card into Lily's hand. "My husband is on the board of the Symphony Society. Call me next week." Lily nodded, too stunned to form a proper response as she pocketed the card. More people approached with similar comments, some just wanting to express their appreciation, others mentioning connections to music schools or performance venues. As the crowd thinned, she remained at the piano, playing softly while people browsed the auction items in the next room. Her mind was racing, trying to process what had just happened. For the first time in years, she had been seen not as a server, not as someone struggling to make ends meet, but as a musician, an artist. Rachmaninoff. The voice startled her, and her fingers stumbled briefly before regaining their rhythm. She looked up to find Richard Winters standing beside the piano, his expression unreadable. "Yes," she replied cautiously, continuing to play a gentle Chopin piece. "Piano Concerto No. 2, first movement." He nodded, watching her hands move across the keys. "You're the waitress," he said after a moment. It wasn't a question. "I am," Lily acknowledged, lifting her chin slightly. "The one who spilled water on your suit last week." A flash of recognition and perhaps discomfort crossed his face. "I thought I recognized you, but I couldn't place how. The change of context." He trailed off, gesturing vaguely at her dress and the piano. Lily said nothing, waiting to see where this conversation would go. Part of her wanted to confront him about his cruel words, to throw his assumptions about her back in his face, but another part recognized that such satisfaction would be fleeting and ultimately meaningless. "Where did you study?" he asked finally. "Juilliard," she replied, her fingers still moving over the keys. "For 3 years. I had to leave before completing my degree." His eyebrows rose slightly. "Why?" The question was direct, almost demanding, but there was genuine curiosity in his tone. Lily considered not answering. Her personal circumstances were none of his business, but decided that the truth might challenge his assumptions more effectively than any retort. "My mother became ill," she said simply. "I was on scholarship, but it only covered tuition, not living expenses. I needed to work full-time to pay for her medical care, and I couldn't manage that while keeping up with the practice requirements." She saw something shift in his expression, not quite sympathy, but perhaps a reassessment. He was silent for a moment, continuing to watch her play. "The young man at your table that day," Lily added, unable to resist, "the one with the education startup you were criticizing, was his app designed to help students like me? Those who have the talent and drive but face circumstances beyond their control?" Winter's jaw tightened slightly, but he didn't appear angry at her question. "Something like that," he admitted. "Tom's idea is to provide virtual education options for students who can't attend traditional institutions due to personal circumstances." "Sounds worthwhile," Lily commented mildly, focusing on a particularly delicate passage in the music. "Perhaps," he conceded. "I'm reconsidering my position after tonight's demonstration." Before Lily could respond, the young man himself, Tom, appeared at Winter's side, his kind eyes alight with excitement. "There you are, Richard," he said. "I've been looking everywhere for you." He turned to Lily with a warm smile. "Your performance was absolutely incredible. I've never heard anyone play Rachmaninoff like that outside of a concert hall." "Thank you," Lily replied, genuinely touched by his enthusiasm. "Tom Nelson." He introduced himself, extending his hand. "I'm on the hospital board with Richard." Lily paused her playing to shake his hand. "Lily Chen." "Ms. Chen was just telling me she studied at Juilliard," Winters said, his tone neutral. "Really?" Tom's eyes widened. "That's amazing. Are you performing anywhere regularly?" "Just here, apparently," Lily said with a small smile, gesturing to the restaurant piano. "That's—" Tom began, but was interrupted by the older woman from the hospital board approaching their small group. "Richard, they're waiting for you to announce the auction winners," she said, then noticed Lily. "Oh, our brilliant pianist. My dear, you were extraordinary. Especially that Rachmaninoff. I haven't heard it played with such passion in years." "Thank you," Lily said, feeling slightly overwhelmed by all the attention. "In fact," the woman continued, turning back to Winters, "this young lady just made a rather compelling case for your music therapy program, wouldn't you say?" Winters gave her a tight smile. "I believe we should continue that discussion at our next board meeting, Catherine." "Of course," the woman, Catherine, replied with a knowing look. She patted Lily's shoulder. "Keep playing, dear. You're bringing something special to this event." As Catherine led Winters away toward the auction area, Tom lingered by the piano, watching Lily resume her playing. I should probably follow them, he said reluctantly. But I wanted to say, I remember you from the restaurant last week. I'm sorry about how that situation unfolded. Lily nodded, appreciating his acknowledgement without making a big deal of it. Thank you. Tom glanced toward the auction room, then back at Lily. I have a feeling we'll be talking again soon, he said with a smile before following the others. Left alone at the piano once more, Lily continued to play, her mind racing with the events of the evening. For the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of hope that perhaps her dream wasn't completely out of reach after all. Maybe, just maybe, this unexpected performance was the beginning of something new. The night of the charity gala changed everything, though not in the immediate, dramatic way that happens in movies. Life rarely works that way. Instead, small shifts began to occur in Lily's world, like the first pebbles of an avalanche. The morning after the gala, Lily woke up to find her phone buzzing with text messages from her coworkers. Apparently, George had told everyone about her performance, and now the entire staff wanted details. Tina had sent a simple message that made Lily smile. Told you so. You're going to be famous. She was scheduled for the lunch shift that day, and as she entered the restaurant, she noticed the atmosphere change. Coworkers who had barely spoken to her before now greeted her warmly. Miguel gave her a high five, and Chef Robert emerged from the kitchen specifically to shake her hand. George tells me you brought the house down last night, he said with genuine admiration. Always knew there was something different about you. Lily thanked him, feeling slightly uncomfortable with the attention, but appreciating the support nonetheless. As she tied her apron around her waist and picked up her order pad, she couldn't help glancing at the piano. It had been returned to its usual corner position, looking somehow smaller and less significant in the daylight. Oh, Lily, George called as she was about to start her section. Someone left this for you. He handed her a small cream-colored envelope with her name written on it in elegant handwriting. Inside was a business card for Catherine Porter, chairwoman of the Children's Hospital Foundation, with a handwritten note on the back. My dear, your talent is exceptional. Please call me on Monday to discuss a potential opportunity. The foundation needs someone like you. Lily stared at the card, trying to process what this might mean. Before she could think too deeply about it, the doors opened for the lunch service and she had to focus on her job. The shift passed in a blur of routine tasks, but Lily felt different. Her posture was straighter, her smile more genuine. The piano in the corner was no longer just a painful reminder of what she had lost. Now it represented possibility. 3 days later, Lily found herself sitting in Catherine Porter's elegant office at the Children's Hospital Foundation, nervously smoothing the skirt of her one good interview outfit, a simple navy blue dress she'd purchased secondhand for job interviews. Thank you for coming. Ms. Chen, Catherine said warmly, gesturing for Lily to take a seat. I was deeply impressed by your performance the other night. Thank you, Lily replied, trying to project confidence despite her nerves. It meant a lot to be able to play again. That much was obvious, Catherine said with a knowing smile. Music like that doesn't come from mere technical skill, it comes from the soul. She folded her hands on her desk and looked at Lily thoughtfully. I mentioned we might have an opportunity for you. Are you familiar with our music therapy program? Lily nodded. I volunteered with a similar program during my time at Juilliard. I've seen firsthand how music can help children who are dealing with illness and trauma. Exactly, Catherine said, her eyes lighting up. Our program has been running on a limited basis for the past year, but we've recently received funding to expand it significantly. She paused. No small thanks to your performance, I might add. Lily looked at her questioningly and Catherine chuckled. Richard Winters has been our biggest obstacle on the board. He's brilliant with numbers and investment strategies, but sometimes lacks vision when it comes to less quantifiable benefits. She leaned forward slightly. After hearing you play, he's changed his position. He's now advocating for full funding of the program. Lily couldn't hide her surprise. Really, Mr. Winters? Catherine nodded. He can be difficult and demanding, but he's not incapable of changing his mind when presented with compelling evidence. Her eyes twinkled. And your Rachmaninoff was very compelling evidence indeed. She pulled a folder from her desk drawer and opened it. We're looking for a program coordinator who can also serve as one of our primary music therapists. The position requires both administrative skills and musical talent. along with an understanding of how music therapy works. She looked up at Lily. Sound like something that might interest you? Lily's heart raced. Yes, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Very much so. They spent the next hour discussing the details of the position, the responsibilities, the schedule, and finally, the salary. When Catherine mentioned the figure, Lily nearly gasped. It was more than twice what she made waiting tables, even including tips. The position also comes with benefits, including health insurance, Catherine added, watching Lily's reaction closely. And while it is full-time, the schedule would allow you to continue your own musical pursuits if you wish. It seemed too good to be true. Lily felt a bubble of hope rising in her chest, but then reality intruded. Miss Porter, I should be honest. I don't have my degree. I had to leave Juilliard before graduating. Catherine waved her hand dismissively. Your talent speaks for itself, dear. And from what I understand, you left school to care for an ill parent, which actually demonstrates exactly the kind of compassion and dedication we value in our program. She closed the folder. The job is yours if you want it. Lily did want it, desperately. But there was something else she needed to know. May I ask who recommended me for this position? Catherine smiled. Several people, actually. I was already impressed by your performance, but then Tom Nelson specifically suggested you might be perfect for this role. She paused, and Richard Winters, surprisingly enough, agreed with him quite strongly. As Lily left the foundation offices with an employment contract in her bag and a start date set for the following month, she felt lighter than she had in years. The weight of constant financial worry, of dreams deferred, of feeling trapped in a life she hadn't chosen. It wasn't gone completely, but it had eased significantly. She had one more stop to make before heading home to tell her mother the news. The royal plate was quiet in the late afternoon. The staff preparing for the dinner service. George looked up from his clipboard as Lily entered, still wearing her interview outfit rather than her waitress uniform. There she is, he said with a smile. How did the meeting go? I got the job, Lily replied, still hardly believing it herself. I'm going to be coordinating the music therapy program at Children's Hospital. And playing piano for the children. George's face lit up with genuine happiness. That's fantastic, Lily. Though I have to say I'm going to miss having you here. The customers won't be happy either. You're one of our best servers. About that, Lily said, pulling an envelope from her bag. I wanted to give you my official notice. The new job starts in 4 weeks. George nodded, taking the envelope. Of course. We'll miss you, but this is a wonderful opportunity. He hesitated, then added, You know, after your performance at the gala, I was thinking we might offer you the Saturday night pianist position. But this is much better for you. Lily smiled, touched by his support. Thank you, George. For everything, especially for giving me the chance to play that night. As they spoke, the front door opened and Lily turned to see Richard Winters entering the restaurant. He paused when he saw her, then approached with measured steps. Miss Chen, he greeted her formally. I heard you met with Catherine today. Lily nodded, still not entirely comfortable in his presence despite everything that had happened. Yes, I've accepted the position with the music therapy program. Good, he said simply. Then after a brief hesitation, I owe you an apology. Lily hadn't expected that. She remained silent, waiting for him to continue. My comments that day were inexcusable, Winters said, his usual confident tone replaced by something more reflective. I made assumptions about you based on nothing but my own prejudices. I was wrong. It wasn't the most eloquent apology, but Lily sensed it was sincere, and perhaps rare coming from a man like him. Thank you for saying that, she replied. And thank you for supporting the music therapy program. He shrugged slightly, some of his usual demeanor returning. It's a worthwhile investment. Tom's research showed impressive outcomes for pediatric patients involved in music therapy. A ghost of a smile crossed his face, and your performance was a rather persuasive demonstration of music's power. Before Lily could respond, the door opened again, and Tom Nelson walked in, his face brightening when he saw her. Lily, I was hoping to catch you here, he said, approaching their small group. Catherine just called to tell me you accepted the position. That's wonderful news. His enthusiasm was contagious, and Lily found herself smiling. Thanks. And thank you for recommending me. The recommendation was well-deserved, Tom insisted. In fact, I was wondering if you might be interested in consulting on another project as well. He glanced at Winters. Richard and I are working on expanding my education platform to include arts programs for students who can't access traditional instruction due to financial or personal circumstances. Winters nodded. Your situation is unfortunately common. Talented students forced to abandon their education due to circumstances beyond their control. He straightened his already perfect tie. It's an inefficient system. We're trying to create alternatives. Coming from him, this was practically a passionate speech about educational equity. Lily looked between the two men, seeing an unexpected partnership forming. Tom's idealism tempered by Winter's pragmatism. Winter's coldness warmed by Tom's genuine concern for others. I'd be happy to help however I can, Lily said. 6 months later, Lily stood in the wings of the city's main concert hall, her heart pounding with a familiar mix of nerves and excitement. She smoothed down the front of her elegant black concert dress, a gift from Catherine for this special occasion, and took a deep breath. The concert hall was filled to capacity for the Children's Hospital Foundation's annual benefit concert. In the front row, she could see her mother in the wheelchair-accessible seating, looking healthier than she had in years, beaming with pride. Beside her sat Tina, Miguel, and several other friends from the royal plate, all dressed in their finest clothes for the occasion. A few rows back, Catherine sat with the hospital board members, including Richard Winters and Tom Nelson. Tom gave her an encouraging thumbs up when he caught her eye. The past 6 months had been transformative. The music therapy program had flourished under Lily's guidance, bringing joy and healing to countless children. Her work with Tom's education platform had helped create opportunities for other talented students facing obstacles similar to those she had encountered. And most importantly, she had returned to her own music, practicing daily and performing regularly. Tonight was special, though, her first solo concert since leaving Juilliard. When the foundation had decided to feature a piano soloist at their benefit instead of hiring a full orchestra, Catherine had immediately suggested Lily for the role. The announcer's voice rang through the hall, introducing her. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage our featured soloist for this evening, Lily Chen. As Lily walked onto the stage, the applause washed over her. She took her place at the magnificent grand piano at center stage, adjusted the bench, and looked out at the audience. There were hundreds of faces looking back at her, all waiting to hear her play. Just 6 months ago, she had been invisible, a waitress carrying plates, someone easy to dismiss and ignore. Now she was seen, her talent recognized, her voice expressed through her music finally. Being heard, she placed her hands on the keys and began to play Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, the same piece that had changed the course of her life that night at the royal plate. As the powerful opening chords filled the concert hall, she caught Richard Winters' eye in the audience. He gave her a small, respectful nod, acknowledging how far she had come. Lily smiled and lost herself in the music, her fingers flying across the keys with confidence and passion. This was who she had always been, who she was meant to be. Not just a waitress who played piano, but a pianist who had once been a waitress. And as the music soared through the hall, touching everyone who listened, Lily knew that every struggle, every hardship, every moment of doubt had led her exactly where she needed to be. Sometimes life's greatest setbacks were just setting the stage for the most beautiful comebacks.